start off, Courtney Kroll is here from Office of Global Affairs, and she has some kind of general cultural stuff. I'm not going to explain what she's going to do. She can explain it. And when she's done, then we're going to have devote the rest of the session to talking about the academic portion of the study abroad. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to refer to you all throughout the session, so feel free to add in, get cozy, or do whatever you need to do. Okay, everybody, so this is, I accidentally turned it off even though Mary had it on, so it's just warming up. But I'm Courtney, like Mary said, I'm Study Abroad Manager. You've probably received emails from me before, so this is my face. And you have a Post-it note in front of you today. Could you put your name on that right now, please? Put it on there small.
I have a pen. Yeah.
Oh, a pen. Yes, I have a pen. Oh,
Yeah.
you want? You got one. Okay. Well, I got two extras just in case. So, just put your name on that, and I'll tell you what we're going to do with the Post-it note in a minute. But the last time I had orientation, about half the students put their name on it, and that didn't really help my cause. So please just make sure you do that. Okay, so let's see. Today, everybody see this? Yeah. Today we're going to talk about social identity and China and Taiwan, cultural humility, living and studying with your colleagues, your UWT colleagues, next steps from the Office of Global Affairs, and then we're also going to talk about goal setting. Okay? So, this is why you have a Post-it note in front of you. I would like you to take a minute to think about a goal or several goals you have for your study abroad. So it can be anything that essentially any reason you decided to participate in this program, something you're hoping to achieve or learn, and write it down. And then we will talk about why I'm asking you to do this and share. Okay? So go ahead, take a minute. Does everybody understand? Got it? Just thinking. Okay. Take about 20 more seconds to finish those goals. You can have more than one. That's totally appropriate. So finish up. Does anyone want to share one of your goals? Yes, thank you.
To gain a deeper understanding of the difference between mainland and Taiwanese culture.
Perfect, and I think your goal fits perfectly with the program that you chose, so well done. Good, thank you. Okay, so yours is potentially academic, cultural, right? Okay, wonderful. Anybody else have one they'd like to share? Maybe something different? I'm going to tell you two things. I was an elementary school teacher for 7 years, so if you don't talk, I have really great ways of getting you to participate. And also, we're going to be doing some chatting today anyway, so just remember that you're not going to be sitting here having me talk at you for an hour, okay? Does anybody else have one they want to share? Do you feel comfortable with yet? It's okay. That's okay. Got lots more talking to do. Why I'm asking you to do this, right? Without goals, how can you achieve anything? So you are spending a lot of time and money going to China and Taiwan, right? Mainland China and Taiwan. You should have some reasons for doing this, and you're not going to be able to achieve anything if you don't know in advance why you're going or what you're hoping to get out of it, right? So if you came here today and you're kind of like, I want to travel, or I really am interested in China, but you don't have anything concrete, that's okay. But my hope for you is that by the end of the session, or by the time you step off the plane, you have some actual goals in mind. And some of those goals, this is a lot of text, but these goals can be academic, they can be related to ability and skill building, they can be about attitudes or awareness. Just because you are participating in an academic experience doesn't mean that everything you take from it has to do with, your major, right? There's lots of growth that can happen on study abroad. So thinking about, if you're hoping to gain some confidence in being independent, right? Or if you want to have better awareness of your own culture and your own values through, by looking at those through a different culture, right? Any of those are fine, but I'm hoping that as we go through the session today, maybe you evolve, maybe your goals change. And the reason why I had you write them down with your name is because I'm going to be collecting these at the end of the session today. And in a few months, when you get back from your study abroad, one of the students in my office is going to send you an email and say, hey, this was your goal. Did you achieve it? Why am I not? Okay? So we want you to check in with these. All right, so the majority of what I'm going to be talking about today is this phrase social identity. I think this is something that we're pretty familiar with at UW. I think this is something that students talk about in their classes a lot, but just in case you're not sure what that phrase means, social identity is a person's sense of who they are based on their group memberships, right? So we've got this mosaic thing over there that shows that there's lots of different identities that a person can have. So that means your religion, your race, your age, your sexual identity, all of those things, okay? And all of those things are going to interact with your host country, okay? So take a minute in your brain, just think about how you identify in terms of your ability or your sex or your gender expression, okay? Just list them off in your brain. Just take 30 seconds to do that. I think these are relatively obvious to you all, but so I would like you to now think about how these identities are going to interact with your host country. So my first question is, or first comment, I know that some of you might be international students here at UW who are Chinese or Taiwanese citizens. This is still a pertinent discussion for you, okay? Because you have layered identities now that you're studying here and then you're going back, you're going to see potentially China or Taiwan in a totally different way, and you're going to see it through the eyes of your colleagues and peers too. So just a side note. Okay, so let's think about how your experience is going to be shaped by your identities. Okay, I'm going to start with an example from myself to get you rolling, and then you're going to do some chatting. So I actually studied abroad for a very short time in China for my master's degree, just for a week. It was very, very short. But I identify as tall, white, and a woman, right? How did my identities interact with those in China, with China, right? So what I'd like you to do is get a little buddy or a pair or a triad, whatever you want. Find somebody to talk about this for 30 seconds with, okay? So you two, maybe you two, and you two, okay? Just have a quick chat. I'm in China. How am I interacting with China? How am I perceived? How am I treated because of how I look? Go for it.
Chinese in all learning local stuff. I'm sure. Right, being right there, I'm sure that's a different experience, especially yeah, as a person in the United States who used to be part of the majority of Earth, so I'm sure that's a big contrast. And so I have no idea what the average height in China is. She's definitely really tall. So
I guess. Okay, everybody, that's fine. Thank you. Let's share. Would you in the back give us thoughts on me in China and how I was treated or perceived because of my social identity. Any thoughts? You have no thoughts? I don't believe it, but okay. Anybody else?
I'm assuming you were looked at as a foreigner.
Sure, why?
Because you're not part of the majority group.
Right, thank you. Exactly, right? I'm tall, I have different colored skin, different kind of hair than a society that's mostly homogenous. So I stood out, right? And as, like I heard someone say, as someone who is sort of, well, not sort of, is in the majority in the United States, never having had experience being a member of the minority, right? I don't have coping skills for that, right? I don't know how to navigate a society where I'm totally different and it's obvious, okay? All right, so everyone in their brain has something called a cultural lens, right? We all have a way we see the world and we perceive it through our own culture or our own social identities. So obviously when you're abroad, the people in your host country are going to be perceiving you through their own culture and cultural lens. But there's something else to remember. It's not just about how you identify, it's how others see you. So if you identify as something, like let's say you identify as gay, right? That's not written on your forehead. People don't automatically know that when they perceive you. So they might not understand that, or they might not have that idea in their brain when you are perceived by them. So just as important, it's important to think about how your identities are going to interact with your host culture, but it's also important to think that that doesn't always matter because you're going to be perceived in a way no matter what. Okay, so I'm going to give you another scenario of my study abroad in Beijing. I was in a group of students for my master's degree, and one of my colleagues identifies as Asian American. Okay, she has roots from China. She does not speak Mandarin or Cantonese. When asked, she would call herself American first and then Asian American, right? How did her experience in China differ from mine? Chat.
So in my time of study, or not studying abroad, traveling abroad, I've been in multiple instances where people either think I was German or French and would start speaking the language immediately, and then when they found out otherwise, they think, oh wow, and the awkward moment. Sure, that was a reality that probably occurred. I don't know if you think that has happened.
Yeah, it's like, look, I say someone is like looks like a Chinese. I don't know.
Okay, take like 15 more seconds to finish up.
First, like Chinese.
Okay.
And then maybe it's that, sorry, I cannot speak Chinese, so
I'm sure that's a pretty common interaction.
All right. Would you two care to share, please, what your thoughts are on my colleague? How was her experience different from mine?
I think we would treat you as a friend from outside the world. Yes, and we would like to share with you a lot of Chinese culture.
So, with me or with my colleague who is Asian American, who potentially looks Asian or Chinese? That's the difference here. You understand? So, I think maybe once someone found out that they were not from China, they might say, "Oh, well, let's share." But upon perception, like you just look at someone and they don't look like maybe what a stereotypical American looks like. How is that experience going to be different than someone who does have blonde hair and blue eyes or whatever? You
maybe we
understand?
just talk Chinese with you.
Right? Maybe they're like, "Oh,
Yes.
right, that's fair." Yeah. So they're potentially greeted in Mandarin and Cantonese, right? Any other thoughts? Besides just the language?
They might not be identified as American at all.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So, in a lot of places around the world, they have an idea of what it means to be this or that, right? What it means to be French, what it means to be American, what it means to be Mexican. And if you don't fit into that box, you might not be perceived as that. So my colleague, that was the case. She had never really questioned her Americanness until she got to China and was treated as, she was not treated the same way that a lot of the other members in our group were. When we were on tours, she wasn't sort of included in the tours because I think people assumed that she was not part of the group. And that's not necessarily a terrible thing, but it did cause some awkwardness, and it did cause her to be kind of confused about who she is and what her identity is. And that did give her an experience that was different from others, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just something to think about, something to be aware of, right? So the point of this is thinking about how your identity is going to be perceived while you're abroad, and if that meshes with how you actually identify, right? So, and just as you said, someone might have spoken to her in Chinese or Mandarin, whatever. Someone made an assumption that she was Chinese, right? Has anyone ever had a situation in here where someone made an assumption about you that was totally false? And I think we've all probably been in a situation where someone's just judged you by something that you are wearing or how you're perceived, and it's been totally false. That's happened here, it's likely going to happen elsewhere, right? So just being prepared for having perceptions or being judged for things that you don't necessarily identify with, okay? So this is where I'm going to call upon our experts over here. Part of your identity is going to interact with sort of the things that are happening in mainland China and Taiwan now, right? So, what do you know about the major religion, or the current events, or the racial and ethnic history, or LGBTQ plus issues in mainland China and Taiwan? Some of you, I imagine, if you are Chinese or Taiwanese, you probably know a lot. But what do you know about these things? Does anybody have any examples of any of these things? Immigration, population makeup, yeah?
Taiwan's really progressive when it comes to the
LGBTQ plus?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're the first major country in East Asia to legalize gay marriage.
Wow.
Not gay marriage, but domestic partnerships.
You know that. Okay. So potentially in Taiwan, there is a more accepting culture than in other parts of China, right? That's something to think about. Anybody else know about anything else? Any of these? Anything about current events? Or, yeah, thank you.
The president of China just signed himself in to be the indefinite president of China.
Yeah.
Which some people kind of like and some people don't like.
Mm-hmm. And depending on who you're with in China, whether or not you can talk about that, right, is something to consider, right? So the point of this is the country that you're going to be studying in has a history of, I think China especially, it's a very old country with a very long history that you are just stepping into, right? So there are things that you need to be aware of in terms of your social identity that interact with some of these categories here. So let's see. I already said that. Something I want to have you take away today is how your social identity might benefit you while you're abroad. So for instance, like I said before, if you are identify as a minority in the US, you might already understand what it's like to navigate places in which you're treated differently, right? This is giving you coping skills. So if you already are used to that here, when you get abroad, you might be like, yep, I know what to do, I'll be fine. Or for instance, if you are from a family of immigrants and you've seen people work to navigate in a new society where they have to learn a new language and learn cultural norms, then you likely have some adaptability skills and problem-solving skills that other students might not have, right? Or if you're an international student here, and you know what it's like to live in China, and you know what it's like to live here, and you have a huge set of tools and skills to draw upon that your colleagues might not have, right? So, when it comes to thinking about how your social identity is going to interact with your study abroad, just prepare for some potential situations in which you might feel uncomfortable or just confused. So as someone said earlier, many people around the world have an idea of what a student from the US or student who's studying in the US looks like, if you don't fit into that mold, those in your host country may not believe you're American. Right? I lived abroad for a long time and people mistook me for lots of things that were not American all the time. And I literally would fight with people, that didn't believe that I was from Michigan, whatever, right? So how is that going to make you feel if someone is essentially telling you, nope, you don't have blue eyes, you don't have blonde hair, you're not from Washington State, right? Is that going to make you feel okay? Is that going to make you kind of question who you are? I mean, it might provide an array of emotions, but preparing for those in advance is key, okay? Another potential thing to think about is if you identify, for instance, as a woman and your host culture has very different ideas about gender roles. How do you interact with this country, right? When you have one set of rules and the country has another, okay? So it's not about preparing for the worst. It's about being prepared for a situation in which you might be uncomfortable or confused, and then trying to unpack that situation to better understand where you are, okay? So, like I said before, thinking about coping mechanisms, like if you already have skills in place to deal with feeling uncomfortable or asking questions, right? Trying to talk to your faculty program directors about why someone might treat you a certain way, okay? But we have other recommendations as well. So if you have a support system here, you should continue to use that support system. So friends, family, using Skype or Facebook or whatever you kids are using these days. There's lots of resources through our office, through the Center of Equity and Inclusion. But the key really is to not lose sight of your goals. So again, that G word, right, goals. If you have a bad day where someone's like, you're not American, whatever, or you don't belong in this group because you don't look like everybody else or whatever it is, don't lose sight of your goals. Don't let that affect your entire time abroad, but rather take a step back and try to understand why someone might say that to you. Try to understand that you might not be, they might not be intentionally trying to hurt your feelings, that really this might be a cultural difference. And on that note, I got some China and Taiwan specific resources here about sort of various identities that you might belong to. So I know there's a lot of text here. I'm going to share this slide with all of you later, or all of the slides, excuse me. So you can pull from these links, but Diversity Abroad is an organization that we work with that provides country-specific guides. So this is the information that I pulled from their website. Just some things to think about, right? So resident, and please, Mary Ian will chime in because this is obviously from a website. But like in lots of places, residents in rural communities have had little direct experience, right, with people from other cultures. So if you're going to be in a rural place, you might be experiencing a little bit more judgment or stares because you're just not used to somebody who looks or talks like you, right? As I said before, depending on your identity, for instance, if you identify as a student of color, you might get some over-curious people or stares. I know I had people touching my hair when I was in China. I had several colleagues who identify as black, and they had people touching their hair and asking to take pictures with us. That's something to potentially prepare for, right? How's that going to make you feel? How are you going to be able to cope with that? Again, with this North American thing, right? If you aren't perceived as being North American, that can be kind of annoying, maybe. And then, like we talked about before, for instance, students who are Asian American may be identified more by their cultural heritage rather than by, where they actually live. And thinking about historical relations between China and other Asian countries, that could affect the way that someone perceives you. So there is way more on this website. So when I send this to you all, you can click on the links. But there's another link for IS Abroad, which has more country-specific information and specific information, for instance, if you have like dietary issues or you are looking for a mosque somewhere, they have really specific information on the website. And then there's these amazing podcasts. Has anyone heard of Black Life in China before? No, okay. They're podcasts by expats, so mostly American, but other countries too, people who are living in China, working there, who identify as Black, and they're podcasts about their life, right? Like weird things that happen to them, or how they're treated one day, or whatever. And whether or not you identify as Black doesn't really matter. It's just a really interesting insight into a homogenous society, right? So take advantage of these resources if you'd like. They're very helpful. Okay, so we're gonna switch gears. Has anyone ever seen this TED Talk before by Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi? So we are going to talk a little bit about this phrase called cultural humility. Basically, cultural humility is an ongoing process in which people self-reflect and critique themselves about their own culture and the culture of others. So this is a process. You're not going to come back from China and be like, I'm 100% cultural humility competent, right? That's not what we're looking for here, but it's about you trying to continually reflect on who you are and who others are. And this video is going to help us dive a little bit deeper into this. So it's only a 3.5 minute video, and afterwards I'm going to have you all chat a little bit about some questions regarding the video. Oh, sorry.
You need to take
Enable. Yeah, last time it let me play it in the presentation, but maybe not.
Enable content.
Thank you. Well, well. Yes. Play. Yes. Thank you. Okay.
He's going to put power.
Yeah. I'm just gonna make it bigger. Hopefully it'll still. No. Sorry. Okay. I was trying to make it bigger. All right. Here we go.
I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator.
Thank you.
And so we had, as was the norm, living domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me as an African was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. It is impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. There is a word, an Igbo word, that I think about whenever I think about the power structures of the world, and it is nkali. It's a noun that loosely translates to be greater than another. Like our economic and political worlds, stories too are defined by the principle of nkali. How they are told, who tells them, when they are told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. The Palestinian poet Mourid Barghouti writes that if you want to dispossess a people, the simplest way to do it is to tell their story and to start with secondly. Start the story with the arrows of the Native Americans and not with the arrival of the British, and you have an entirely different story. Start the story with the failure of the African states and not with the colonial creation of the African state, and you have an entirely different story.
Okay, so, sorry. So, what I would like you to do is talk with your partner again and answer one of these 3 questions. We don't have a ton of time, so just choose one, okay? So, can you see that?
Yeah, again.
Should I turn it off? Is it better?
I don't know. Are you all going to fall asleep if it's turned off?
I wish I could.
Oh, that's good. Good job. Thank you. Okay, so let's focus on the bottom 2. So choose one of the bottom 2 questions. In which cases did Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie experience humility, and to what effect? Or what stories do you expect to find and uncover on your study abroad program? Okay, so take a minute. You choose the question. Chat with your partners. Please. Are you struggling with questions? I see your head shaking. So thinking about, she gave 2 examples of times when she essentially judged somebody and somebody judged her based on perceptions, right? So that's what this second question is asking you to think about.
I like the second question, or the first question. I mean, it's the parent that kind of demeaned by the college roommate, and then she demeaned the person who worked at her place. So she got to experience the humility of like being.
Okay, take like 10 seconds to finish up, please.
I don't know.
Okay. So, in what ways did Chimamanda experience some kind of cultural humility, whether it was put upon her or she sort of was the actionable share? Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. She was judging like a certain realm of persons and really didn't realize that people can apply the same sort of views and prejudice to her.
Right.
So when that happened, she was kind of like, whoa, like there are people that think less of me. It's like, yeah.
So this kind of self-reflection and self-critique, right? So it's a really good example about how people judge you and you judge others unconsciously and unknowingly. And this is very likely, I mean, there's no doubt this is going to happen while you're abroad. But maybe, I'm hoping, that you're expecting to find and uncover something new or different about yourself or about China and Taiwan whilst you're abroad that lets you self-reflect on the experience that you have. Okay, so it's this process of trying to remember, like, this is new, this is different, this might be kind of weird. I'm going to not judge, I'm going to reflect as opposed to making an assumption or a perception, okay? So this takes me into my next slide. So using your cultural humility to interact with your host culture, okay? So I've got some tips for y'all. The word respect, I think, is obvious, but when we say respect, we don't just mean our attitude, but we also mean your voice, the volume of your voice. maybe your clothing. Being respectful with how you embody yourself in a foreign country is really important in terms of trying to understand what's happening in a place and have cultural humility. Open-mindedness, I think, is obvious, but again, with avoiding the judgment, right? So it's not like a competition, oh, we do it better here, or they do it better here. There's no scales. It's just taking something in and being open-minded to it. I always try to tell y'all to keep your smartphone and social media usage to a minimum or in check because
Should we like not use social media basically?
that's something that might be tricky, yes.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, great.
Yeah.
But even if you can, even if you get like an IP address or whatever, remembering that you're in a place to connect with that place and the people you're there with as opposed to constantly reaching back home, right? Act as a mediator between yourself, your culture, and the host culture. And the most important thing on here is avoiding stereotypes. So this is my favorite part of orientation. What are some stereotypes about people who live in the United States? Let's just shout them out.
We're fat.
Okay. Yep. What else?
We're loud.
We're loud, we're fat.
Capitalist.
Pardon me?
Capitalist.
Capitalist. Yeah. What else? Do you have any? No, you just got here. You have any? What are some stereotypes? Keep thinking. I've heard people say that we all carry guns. I've heard people say that we all have yachts, right?
Obnoxious.
Pardon?
Tourists, obnoxious.
Obnoxious tourists. Okay. These stereotypes, first, are not flattering, nor are they accurate. So just as the stereotypes about people who reside in the United States are not accurate, nor are the stereotypes you might have about the host culture that you're going to be experiencing. So that's why we really want to just avoid them at all costs, okay? Again, remembering that people's actions towards you are based on societal and cultural values. They're not doing something to try to annoy you or be difficult. This is something that is ingrained in them, just like your values and culture is ingrained in you. And if you are, like, let's say you get to China and you're struggling a little bit with the amount of people that are everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So the first day you're like, whoa, there's a lot of people here. Check in with the progress you're making. Maybe by day 4 you're like, okay, I don't love this is my favorite thing, but I'm much more comfortable than I was on day 1.
Do you think crowd function is kind of different in China or Taiwan versus America as far as how crowds move around?
That's right.
What do you think? Anybody?
Crowd? What do you mean by that?
Just the way that large groups of people kind of work with each other as far as going to stands and moving around and stuff.
Do you mean like lines or
different-
like
lines and just the kind of way that like people move around and stuff like that, you know?
Personal space.
Yeah, I mean, I would figure that a large crowd in Seattle would function differently than a large crowd in China.
Or maybe it's regional. China's a huge country.
Oh, yeah,
right?
of course.
Or at least
I wonder if they have any different.
I was going to ask anybody else first, but
Mhm.
one thing is that it's easier for the crowds to gather in China than it is in America.
Yeah.
You would encounter some sort of crowds situation much more often over there than you would here. As far as the dynamics in a crowd culture, I'm not quite sure. What do you guys think? I'm not quite sure if they're fundamentally different.
We don't really understand.
You know, when you have a lot of people together.
Is it different in terms of like how close you get to other people, or
Is it like more aggressive? Like, do you like you shove each other more, or like is it more civil?
Just sometimes.
Just
Yeah, if you look at the reviews, sometimes.
like if you were to compare it from when you're here over here, like is there much of a difference?
I think it probably depends on where you're used to being in China and where you're used to being here, right? Like if you grew up in New York City and you're used to being on a crowded subway every day, then going to Beijing on the subway is just like regular days, right? It's dependent upon your past experience. But while you're in China and Taiwan, you can ask your colleagues and say, hey, remember we talked about this at orientation? Tell me about this. right? So just a quick little side note. You all are going to be sharing rooms, right? Raise your hand if you have shared a room with a non-family member before. Okay, so about half, maybe a little more. Great. Okay, this room sharing comes with potential obstacles, right? Because you're going to be studying with people, you're going to be eating, sleeping, traveling, right? You're going to be with these people a lot. So thinking about how you're going to set some expectations for yourself and your roommate is really important. And also thinking about how your living situation might be different than what you're used to. So a lot of students come back from study abroad, and the two things they say to me that are potentially disappointing are, I had a problem with my roommate because I didn't know how to set boundaries, or I didn't know how to talk to them about them eating my cookies or something like that. And why wasn't there a washing machine in my room? Or why wasn't there a dishwasher? Or I wasn't used to walking that much and I had no idea. So thinking about things like bathroom, laundry, the physical space, the amount of space, right? Or walking and taking public transportation, thinking about what you're going to be doing while you're abroad and how those might differ from your current living situations is going to help you set some expectations. It's not good or bad, it just is going to be different. If you're not prepared for that, it could be shocking or it could be frustrating. And your faculty leaders are the people to talk to you about that because they all are the experts, right? But something else, like I said, is setting some mutual expectations with your roommate. So I don't know, have you all decided who's rooming with who already? Okay, yeah. So I'm sure that will happen at some point, but then when it does, you talking with your roommate about the kind of baggage, not the literal, but the emotional baggage you bring to a roommate relationship. For instance, I like to wake up early. My spouse likes to wake up late. What does that do for our relationship, right? Like, or for your roommate situation. If somebody likes to get up early and you like to sleep in, how are you going to handle that? What are your expectations for the shared environment? Like, what kind of cleanliness habits do you have? How do you engage in a dialogue around sensitive topics? So if somebody is doing something that you are frustrated with, how do you talk to them about that? Okay? Thinking about these things so that if something arises, you're prepared. This is really shaky. Okay. And just on a side note, like I said before, when students come back from study abroad, they overwhelmingly have wonderful things to say, but the one thing that they say that they might have been more prepared for were those interpersonal issues between them and other students on their program. So remembering that you have conflict management skills already, right? You all are adults, you all have learned how to interact with other people in a professional and polite manner, trying to continue that kind of interaction while you're abroad is going to help you smooth sailing. Sail smoothly. Okay, so a couple other things. So I work in the Office of Global Affairs, and our job, my main job, is to support students. I support faculty, but my main job is to help you all prepare for your study abroad experience. So as such, we want to make sure that you know that we're here for you now, before you go, while you're abroad, and when you return. So if you need anything while you're abroad, and you don't necessarily want to talk about it with faculty, or you want to talk about it with me because you know me better, or whatever, email me anything you need, okay? We also encourage you to disclose any pertinent personal information with us or with your program directors. So what I mean by this is, like, if you have dietary restrictions, or if you have a disability or an accommodation that you need to be accommodated for while you're in China or Taiwan, tell us now so we can help prepare and help you feel prepared, right? We want to be able to facilitate some kind of dialogue so you feel like you can thrive whilst you're abroad. Okay. I got a real long list of tips. So, my suggestion is to make copies of everything. That means your passport, that means your visa, that means your driver's license. Do not keep all those things on your person, just keep copies on you, okay? Create an arrival plan. So something that I hear from students a lot, especially students who've never traveled abroad before, is I know what to do when I get on the plane. I don't know what to do when I get off the plane. So I'm sure that your program directors will talk to you about this, but also have a plan. Have something like maybe on paper. So if your phone doesn't work, you can No, okay, here's what I do when I get out of the airport. Here's how I get to where I need to be, right? Make sure that you leave you don't keep all your cash and cards on you, right? Call your bank before you go. I can't tell you how many times I haven't done this and then I was talking about this with my spouse last night. We were in Turkey, our credit cards got cut off and he had to ask his mom for money, which was gross. So don't do that in person, okay? Keep your emergency card on you at all times. So if you have any emergency contact information, keep that on you, okay? Bring your medications in your carry-on luggage. Communications, I think you all are pretty tech savvy, but how this interacts with China and Taiwan in terms of, I don't know, FaceTime, I can't remember, I think I used FaceTime while I was abroad, but thinking about that when you're preparing, what apps you can use, like WeChat probably. Again, setting reasonable expectations with yourself. So reasonable means that they are achievable. A lot of students think study abroad is like this crazy rainbow unicorns flying through the clouds experience. And a lot of it is that, but you're also a human in another country, living your life, and not every day is, incredible. So having reasonable expectations for yourself and checking in your goals is really important. And taking time to reflect on your experience, engage in that cultural humility work is going to be really key. Especially, I don't know if you all have reflection pieces for your classes, but if you're already having that, that's wonderful. But you can always do that on your own time too. Okay, so if any of you have gotten an email from me recently saying, we can't register you for your classes because you haven't finished your pre-departure requirements or purchased insurance, please get on that ASAP because we want to make sure that you get credit for your class. So here are the next steps. So complete your online requirements. These are all due May 1st for you all, so they should be long completed, but if they're not, get them done soon. You will not pay for this program until the date that summer tuition is due, which I believe is July 6th. Mm-hmm.
My question, so if you study also that you receive like a study abroad scholarship, do you know when that's going to be?
Is it the UW?
Yeah, the
What's your name? I think you got the UW Study Abroad Scholarship. That's through the Seattle office. So you should be getting it soon, but if you send me an email, I can put you in contact with Kiana. She'll give you a specific date.
I was just like, I didn't want to like go out there, oh, you didn't be pretty and stuff.
No, please, if you want it, let me make a note. I'll find out and get back to you.
And we can pay for it whenever, right?
Yeah, I mean, like you would pay tuition.
Yeah.
It comes into your UW account, and you pay for it as you normally pay tuition. So I'm hoping that's timely, but everybody to each their own. We are registering you for your classes, so do not sign up for any classes. But again, you will not be registered until you submit all your pre-departure requirements. You already attended the program-specific pre-departure orientation today, and you did another one. I think maybe you have one more. So I want to take 3 minutes to reflect back on these goals, okay? So if you didn't have a Post-it note, Autumn in the back has some more. I don't know if you need one on. But imagine that you're finishing up your study abroad program, okay? So it's August, and you're, someone asks you if you've had a successful time, and you say yes. Why? What would you have done while you're abroad? What would you learn? How would it help prepare you for the future? Take a few minutes to edit the goals that you have with these 3 questions in mind so that you can really try to prepare and think about what you're planning to achieve. And for you 3, I'm going to share the goals with you. They'll be anonymous, but also you have a good idea of what students are looking for. Does anyone need a pen? go back to this slide, which has all those ideas about some goals you could have that might help inspire you for the last minute of this. And if you want, I'm going to be taking these goals, so if you want to remember them, you can always take a picture of them on your mobile device, or maybe they're just in your brain, but okay, take like 15 more seconds, and I have one more slide to show you, and then I'll be out of here. I'm gonna go back. Okay, so you feel free to keep writing your goals. This last slide is sort of a shameless plug here. So our office offers lots of programming for you all when you come back from study abroad. So I have to tell you, once you study abroad, you're not done. That's sort of like the beginning, because you're going to come back and you're going to have all these ideas and these reflections, and you might start seeing the world and yourself very differently, and as such, you should really try to take advantage of that. So you've got lots of info sessions, one specifically that helps you reflect and make future plans, one specifically, the second one down. If you don't come to this, I think you're crazy. I don't know why you wouldn't want to come and learn how to market your study abroad experience in a job interview or to get into grad school or on your cover letter or resume. We also have lots of other info sessions about things that you can do once you study abroad if you want to go back abroad, like teaching English abroad or applying for international fellowships or research or grad school. And we have a Global Ambassadors program where we connect international and domestic students and talk about social justice issues once a month. So you will have all this information when I send it to you, so feel free to take part. Does anyone have any questions for me about anything I talked about today before I get out of here? If you do not, that's fine. You will have my email address. You already have it, I know, but I'm going to send these slides to you all. I hope you have a very enriching experience, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. Okay? Thank you. Oh, you don't have to clap. That's too much. Okay, I'll leave that up there. So I'll CC you all of the email about the PowerPoint issues. Some people want to put it on their for the list. I know you know that. You know. Well, thank you all, and I'll see you. I'll be right. Oh, I'll see you.
Okay, everybody, great. There's, gathering up the little squares, so what we're going to be doing for the next half hour that we have left is talking about the academic portion of the study abroad. Both Bill and I will be handing out syllabi. I think, are you going to be giving out a syllabus?
Yep.
Yeah, so we'll both be giving out a syllabi for our classes and just kind of studying in general about what the academic element is going to be. And obviously, I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions that maybe we can answer today, or you may have questions later and we can answer. So a couple of things while Bill's getting ready there. How are things progressing in terms of getting visas and all of that kind of paperwork? Any questions or concerns about any of that? You're all good?
I was contacted by, I said it on WeChat, but I was contacted by the Chinese embassy or something. Abrams, and they said that I didn't get the tourist visa and I got just a different visa.
Yeah.
They said it wasn't an issue, but
Yeah. I don't think that should be an issue he's talking about. You got a, like a conference or a non-business?
Yeah, non-business.
And someone else got a conference?
Someone else get, conference visa.
Yeah, I think
Does it
Malcolm
cost
got
you more?
that I was involved.
So, and anyway, I wouldn't anticipate that's a problem, but you could also talk to someone of Abrams if you want.
They said I could try to bring it. I just didn't want to restart the process or do it if it wasn't a big deal.
Any other visa-related issues? Well, the other thing that we're going to ask you to, Courtney talked a little bit about the roommate situation and some roommate expectations and so on. So some of you may have already talked to someone else in the group about being a roommate, but we want you to, by June 4th, which is Monday, so today's Wednesday, by this coming Monday, June 4th, we want you to let us know either I have a roommate, this is my roommate, or I don't have a roommate, you guys match me up with someone, okay?
I think our assumption is going to be that if you don't tell us who your roommate is by June 4th, that you want to be randomly assigned a roommate.
Okay. So be thinking about that. Communicate with each other on WeChat privately about roommate situations. And yeah, then let us know. You can send us an email or a WeChat and just let us know what the status of your roommate situation is.
There's also the possibility of having a single room. So if you would like to have a single room, that's also something that we can accommodate. So we can probably accommodate, as long as not too many people ask, because we are space constrained in our housing. So right now it looks like the cost for having a single room for the entire program will be $200. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. But that number will rise with the number of people that want a single room. Okay, so if you want a single room, let us know and make sure that you let us know by Monday. Okay.
Is that cost added onto tuition or is that an upfront cost?
I'm not sure. How does that get billed?
Yeah, you'll pay the vendor or our partners over there.
So it would be billed separately.
Right, so it wouldn't be included as part of your
Yeah.
for the program.
We also have, so Courtney talked about this a little bit in terms of communication and setting expectations with your roommate. We think that's very important. And we also have here roommate agreements. So I'm going to pass out a copy of these to everybody. This is obviously not something you need to complete until you've chosen a roommate. But here, we're going to just take one pass around. So inside here are some prompts that will encourage you to talk about some common issues that might arise when you're a roommate. Clarifying expectations, talking about use of shared space, talking about what property you're willing to share, what you're not sharing. And what we would like, once you have chosen a roommate, is for both of you to sit down and work through this agreement. And you'll see on the last page, there's actually a place for you to sign it. So we're going to treat this like a formal agreement, setting expectations with your roommate. And we are going to hold on to this. And we're going to use it to help resolve conflicts that might arise if you do have some kind of an issue with your roommate. Okay, but really, it's a tool for you to structure a conversation with your roommate about what you expect. And also to open up some lines of communication. We'll talk about communication styles, because a lot of times issues are a result of misunderstanding, and so we want to just avoid those if possible.
So one more thing before we launch into talking about our courses. Dr. Lee has already asked you all to share your arrival information and departure information with him. It's very important in particular that we know your arrival information in Type Bay, because we will, if you're arriving on the day that, if you're not arriving early, we will provide airport pickup, okay?
Right, that is on the 24th. Yeah, if you arrive on the 24th, we will arrange the program would cover the airport pickup. In that way, you don't have to worry about it. If you arrive, I know that at least 2 people arrive earlier. In that case, I'm happy to help you as a person, but the program will not cover the costs, will not be responsible for it.
Okay?
Yeah, some of you have already done so, but I want all of you,
So there will be 3 5-credit courses associated with this study abroad. One is called Experiencing China, and that content will be taught by faculty and instructors in China. So we aren't going to be really talking about that today. That will be mostly a little bit of language and a lot of culture and a little bit of historical background and Chinese tradition and that sort of thing. So that'll be taught by our colleagues in China. So today we're going to be talking about our spiritual courses.
Yeah, so do you want me to go first? Or do you want
Sure.
to? Okay, so was that a question? I thought I saw you.
I was just going to ask if the dates when we'll be having lectures or class time will be available beforehand.
Yes, so
Okay.
we are working out the final details on our schedule. I think we do have kind of an open question about the second week in Taipei. But we will have a full schedule that details the class meeting times, because it will vary day to day. So we want to fit it around a lot of site visits and excursions and things like that. We'll make that available. So the class that I will be teaching is called Rise of East Asia. I've got a hard copy of the syllabus here. Go ahead and pass that around. I've also created a Canvas website for the class, which is right here. None of you have access to this yet because I haven't added you to it. That's something I need to do. And actually, I need your emails. I think you've already got the email list, right? So if you could send that to me, I can just give everybody access to the course. We're still trying to figure out Canvas access while we're in China, while we're in Xiamen, because I think we talked about this last time. Canvas relies on services provided by Amazon that are blocked in China. And so this will work while we're in Taipei, but we're going to have to find some kind of a creative solution while we're in Xiamen. But before you go, or in the first 2 weeks of the program, you can see here some details of my class. So click on the link here. We've got the course description. So this class is going to be generally about the economic development of East Asia since World War II. There's a little bit of pre-World War II history that I do just to kind of frame things, but we're going to really focus on the development of East Asia since World War II. And we're going to focus on kind of different economic development models that have emerged in East Asia. And because of where we're going to be in Xiamen and Taipei, we're going to focus in particular on the approach that mainland China took to development and kind of the history of that and the changes that they've gone through, and contrast it with models of development that were adopted by other places in East Asia. And specifically, we'll be talking about Taiwan there, but we'll also be just talking generally about what are known as the 4 Asian tigers. I think that's what referred to as, right? So we'll be kind of contrasting those two different models. We'll talk a lot about international trade and foreign direct investment, and we'll especially be interested in the role of the state. So there's a lot of controversy actually about what is the role of the state? Has the state helped or has it hindered economic development? And certainly the way that the state intervened is very different in these two different kind of broad models. Okay, so the student learning objectives are down here. Some of these are kind of boilerplate, but you can take a look at those. Course materials, there'll actually be 2 textbooks for this course. The first is going to be this one right here. It's called Markets Over Mao. It's written by Nick Lardy. He's an economist. He used to be at UW Seattle, but he's one of the big names talking about China. It's a pretty cheap book. It's like $20 on Amazon. I see it's $3 if you buy it used. I actually got the Kindle version of this, which is pretty handy, just because then if you're already bringing a laptop, you don't have to worry about also bringing a separate book. So we'll be talking about that. That's going to give us a lot of information, particularly about China's recent economic history. The textbook that's really going to frame the rest of the discussion about Asia more generally is this one right here. It's called The Political Economy of East Asia, Striving for Wealth and Power. And this book, if you buy it new, is about $35. So again, not too expensive. You can get it cheaper than that if you buy it used. I don't see the Kindle option on here. I would not go with the e-textbook version in this case. But these will be the books that we're going to use. You don't have to buy them from Amazon. They're not going to be provided at the bookstore. So I just recommend that you buy these online. Okay. In addition to that, there's going to be articles that I will provide through Canvas. And again, given that access to Canvas may be difficult when we're in Xiamen, I recommend that you maybe go into the Canvas page early and just download all the articles now so that you have them available offline. Okay. Grading. So we're only going to have 4 components of your grade in this class. There's going to be a final exam. The final exam is going to be administered as a take-home exam, and that will be something you turn into me after we come back from the program. I usually do sometime in August. Is that when the grades due for this?
I don't know, but sometime mid-August.
Sometime mid-August, something like that. Okay. There's also going to be weekly quizzes. The quizzes at this point I'm planning to administer online. But again, given difficulties with access, we might have to revisit that. There's going to be weekly reflection papers. So the reflection paper, I'm going to ask you to write 3 to 5 pages, so minimum of 3 full pages. So I don't mean 2 pages in one line, I mean 3 full pages, and a maximum of 5 pages. Just reflecting generally about an important site that we visited, or a guest speaker that we invited, or even maybe just a lecture that we had, and how that might correspond to something that you've experienced during the previous week. So there's 4 of these, and of course participation. So we went to great lengths to set up lots of interesting visits for you. We're going to be talking to some really interesting people, and we expect you to be fully engaged and paying attention when we're doing those. Okay, so just for transparency, the way all of your grades are going to be reported to you in percentage form on the individual assignments. The way that I convert those to the 4.0 GPA scale is using this formula right here. So I calculate your GPA by just taking your percentage grade. So if you got a 90%, I would plug in 0.9, multiply by 8.92, and subtract 4.65. Okay, so with this system, generally speaking, you hit a 4.0 to 97%. So anything at or above 97% will earn a 4.0. Any score below 60%, so anything 59.9 earns a 0.0. Okay, so you're aiming for somewhere in between there, hopefully up toward the 97% range. Detailed instructions are going to be provided separately on the assignment pages for each of these assignments. And again, you'll be able to access those when I add you to the Canvas page. I don't expect that this is going to be an issue. This is actually just boilerplate for all my classes, but plagiarism is something that we take very seriously at University of Washington, Tacoma. When you turn in your reflection papers, I am going to have it go through the plagiarism detection software. That's not, the report is not going to automatically generate a response from me. It's just going to flag whether or not I need to look more closely at something. But do make sure that you're careful to use your own words and your own ideas and appropriately cite the work of others if you incorporate it into your papers. Okay. Oh yeah, and then another big one, late work is not accepted. So there'll be specific deadlines. I expect to receive the work by the specific deadline. If I do not, it'll be a 0. Okay. So we can go here to the schedule of readings. So right now it's just in sections. I don't have the exact dates worked out for each of these. Part of that is I want to make sure that it's timed appropriately with our visits, which are still a little bit up in the air. But we're going to start out with just kind of an introduction to East Asia and the East Asian economic system, talk a little bit about history, and we got a couple of interesting papers here thinking about why the Industrial Revolution happened in the West rather than in the East. We'll go through what's called the East Asian Miracle, which refers to the rapid period of growth in East Asia after World War II. And I've identified a few readings here that take a particular look at Taiwan, just because that's going to be the context for us during the first part of the class. After that, we'll do plenty of stuff about China. So if you've taken my Chinese economy class, I think you may have read all of these things already. But it's okay, you can revisit them, gain all kinds of new insights. And then we'll move on to talking about East Asia as it relates to the global economy, and then finally think about the future of the East Asian economic system and what are some of the prospects, what are some of the challenges, what are some of the trends that we're observing now, and where do we think it's going to go. Okay. So that's kind of the broad overview of the class. Again, I encourage you to go online and download the course files. For some reason, the modules page is not showing up, but all of the papers have already been uploaded here under readings within the course files. So it might be a good idea for you just to download all of these once you have access to the Canvas page, just so you have access to them offline. Okay? And make sure that you get those 2 textbooks before we leave. I think that would be ideal. Yeah.
So we definitely need to bring our laptops, right?
I would, definitely recommend bringing a laptop. Let's see. I don't know. I don't want to promise that we'll have access to public computers. Honestly, I would bring a laptop. If that's an issue for somebody, we can definitely talk about some alternatives. Okay. And are there any questions about the class? Yes.
Is for the final exam?
Yes.
The multiple choice or?
It's going to be a combination of multiple choice and short answer.
Chat.
Yep.
Have you used WeChat to update the syllabus Canvas in China?
Have I what?
I mean, can we use the Canvas in China for the internet audience?
So last time we were not able to. So that's something that we're still working on, and that's why I recommend that you download all of this stuff. So if we're not able to access Canvas while we're in Xiamen, then I think you can just submit assignments via email. We should still be able to do that, or WeChat, I guess. So we'll find a way to make sure that you turn the work in. But yeah, I think we don't want to rely on access to Canvas when we're in Xiamen. Okay.
I need to get into my email. I think are you on using Google Chrome?
Yeah, I'm using.
So if I do Foxfire, I can get into
Yep.
mine. How do I get Foxfire up?
It's on the desktop. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, you guys are easy.
What citation style do you like for?
I actually like the Chicago 16th edition author date style.
Me too, me too.
But I'm not going to be a stickler on it. We're not doing a research paper, so it won't be.
I guess the footers will make a few pages a little easier to hit.
No, there's no footnotes
Oh, no.
in the author date style.
Oh, yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Gotta try.
I guess you can add footnotes of like additional points, but that's a smaller font and it's single space, so you won't be doing yourself any favors. Yeah, the references will not count.
Okay. All right, you guys. So a few minutes to talk about history. And I printed out a copy, but my printer bombed on me. I don't have the 4th page, which has all the course requirements on it. So, but I will send this out. I don't have a Canvas site for the course yet, but I'll send this out electronically as well, which will make it a lot easier for you to see why momentarily. So this course is global history. It's the global 20th century, and we're going to be looking at the history of global history in the 20th century through the lens of East Asia in general and through the lens of Taiwan and mainland China in particular. So I've organized it kind of with 5 main topics, 5 main themes, and you can see, we can kind of scroll through here on the syllabus. I did make a note, I hope on all of your syllabi, that the 4th page is missing, just as a little warning to you that it doesn't you don't see the course requirements. But the course schedule will follow basically these 5 topics. Starting first with imperialism and colonialism, the impact in East Asia. Imperialism in this context doesn't mean emperors, it means one country extending control over another. So we'll look at that first, imperialism and colonialism. We'll move into the early 20th century and look at communism and its opponents, the rise of communism in China, and the kind of the division of the world into plus communism and anti-communism, I guess I can say. Topic 3 will be World War II, looking at that as a global event, but focusing on the Asian involvement in the Second World War. Topic 4 will be looking at the Cold War again through the East Asian lens, and finally the post-Cold War order. I don't have textbooks with this course. If you're looking at your syllabus so far, you can see that what we're going to be doing is I've given you the links to articles and book chapters that will be available online. I am a little bit concerned about internet access, and so I do not want you, and I'll put a note to this effect so that you can be reminded about this, but I don't want you to get to Taiwan or mainland China and say, oh gosh, I can't access these things. So I recommend that you download them onto a laptop before you go. I'll have my own copies downloaded as a backup issue. But if you want to print them out, you can do that as an alternative as well. But in lieu of having textbooks, I've put together a set of readings. Okay. So if you have questions as I'm going along, go ahead and stop me. In terms of we'll go back up, and the student learning objectives you can kind of see up here is learning, about these ideas, the very broad topics, imperialism and colonialism, as I was talking about earlier. It's going to be very important that you do your reading in advance of our class meetings, because participating in class discussion and being ready to kind of comment on what you've read and what you're observing is going to be an important part of the academic experience for this class. Okay, so now I'm going to scroll down to the page that you guys don't have on this particular version of the syllabus, and which is the course requirements. Actually, I'm not going to scroll down to that because I've changed them. So I guess it's a good thing that there is no fourth page. So let me write them on the board for you. And you can write them down if you like, or you can wait till I send this out electronically. So for each of the 5 topics, I'm going to have you do a 2 to 3 page reading analysis. Okay? So 2 to 3 page, double-spaced analysis of that article or chapter, whatever it is, okay? So what does that mean? It means that you need to obviously do the reading, be able to identify what is the author's main argument, what is the author trying to, what kind of an argument is the author trying to make? How is the author making that argument? What kind of evidence is the author using to support his or her argument? And thirdly, why does it matter, okay? So, what's the argument? What's the evidence? And who cares? And why do we care? Something along those lines, okay? So 2 to 3 page reading analysis on each of these topics that is based on one of the readings for that week, or that, not that week, but that topic, okay? Next, reflection paper. 5 reflection papers. You know, 1 to 3 pages. Why don't we just say 2 to 3 pages, okay? It's actually easier to write a long paper than it is to write a short paper, you know. What are these going to be? These are going to be related to the topics, but more kind of your personal experiences and observations about, for example, the topic of imperialism and colonialism. So while we're in Taiwan, while we're in China, what do you observe that relates to that topic? Are you seeing, you know, some Xiamen, for example, was a treaty port. It was one of the first treaty ports that China was forced to open to, well, in that case to the British, but to other Western countries as well. It's certainly an example of imperialism in action. We're going to be in a place that you know, has a history of that, a direct historical experience of that. So the reflection papers will go with each of the topics, but it will be more your own personal thinking about that topic based on your observations and your experience that you're gaining from being, you know, in country, so to speak. Okay, and then finally, each of these will be worth 10%. So this will be 50% of your grade, overall grade. All right. Each of these will be worth 5%. So this will be 25% of your overall grade. And then finally, a 5-page research paper on one of the topics: imperialism, the Cold War, communism, World War II, whatever you're most interested in. Okay, and this will be 25% of the grade. Okay, so those are the categories of assignments for this class. All right. Obviously, I'll be giving you more. You know, you're going to have plenty of time to ask me questions about this when we're there, right? But I'll give you more detail about this. I want you to run your topics by me before you get too involved in it, so that we can be kind of focused in what you choose to do. Okay. So, any questions about any of this? Okay. Dr. Lee, you want to do some follow-up on any of this? So we are going to have a third orientation, which will be, we haven't set a date yet.
Yeah, we should do it.
We better do it soon.
Yeah.
Probably be good for you before we who's meeting first? Actually, I'm leaving on June 21st, so we have to move on first after this.
I'm leaving on the 19th.
So-
Starting on the 19th?
On the 19th?
Yeah.
I got you on June. You're leaving June 8th?
You're leaving America, going back to China.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for dinner last year too.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did.
we did.
Well, anyway, let's do
Yeah,
that.
let's just do that. Yeah, the third orientation, usually in our tradition, we're going to have a buffet together, a buffet dinner together in one of the all-you-can-eat places. Just right here, it's called the AAA, Triple A buffet. So you can be on your own because the program's not going to pay for you, but it will create a chance for us to get together to share notes and in a more relaxed environment. On that day, we're not going to kind of impose a lot of work on you and say do this and do that. We're going to sit around and chat and kind of build a relation together.
We practice eating together.
Yeah, because we're going to have a lot of chance to eat together, to dine together at the same table throughout the whole time.
So we'll get that date set soon and let you know. Okay. It will be after finals, so don't worry about that. I always want to do anything before finals. So,
Yeah, just watch out for the notice, either in the email or WeChat.
Was it our third class? Third course? Or am I just?
Yeah, the third course is Experiencing China, and that will be taught by colleagues of ours in China itself. So that's why we're not talking about it today. So we don't know what the,
I mean, we have kind of general guidelines of what that will be. They'll be able to tell you.
anything else?
Any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the tuition, like, when is the due that you
Tuition.
Whenever tuition is normally due.
She said July 6th. July 6th, I think she said.
Okay.
But double check with Courtney.
All right. Good.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Okay.
Have a good day.